All right, Marginal Gains viewers, we have a super exciting project announcement today. This one's been a few weeks in the making. A couple of the interviews and conversations we've had over the last maybe 2 months here during COVID led to somebody saying, like, Josh, we need to just build a bike. And so we came up with Project Gravel, which is pretty exciting for me. I haven't had a new bike in probably 20 years. Surprises a lot of people. You've seen the Mercs, kind of my old school thing. I honestly haven't even ridden a modern bike outside of some tooling around on some pro team bikes, you know, when we do work with those guys. So our friends Gerard and Renee at 3T stepped in, our friends at Shimano stepped in and had a million ideas swirling around. We're going to have some other fun partners coming on board, and we decided we are going to build a modern gravel bike that is in this box, but we're going to do it with what 3T calls their Race Max platform. And this one's exciting to me. So Race Max is the concept of having really one bike, multiple wheel sets, and you can really be racy, you can be maximum tire, a bit gravelly, a bit mountain bikey even. So let's go ahead and open the box. I am pretty excited to see what's inside. All right, this, I have to say, is pretty awesome. Look at this thing. Gerard, you were totally right that if there were a modern bike that had the feel and the paint scheme to live in the garage alongside the Eddie Mercs, it would be this bike. This is absolutely beautiful. Those of you watching, if you could feel the weight of this frame, pretty unreal. Again, I deal with race bikes kind of all the time. The idea that you can have a sort of modern mountain gravel road mashup like this at a weight that's not too far above what you're going to find in like a Pro Tour road frame is pretty unbelievable. I mean, look at that tire clearance. You can go all the way up to, I think, a 2 1/4, 2.5 inch tire in this thing, and all at a weight that it's just kind of unbelievable in the hands. So wow, what a beautiful piece of work. Look at that arrow shaped seat tube, seat post, big arrow down tube with coverage for the water bottle, and as we'll show in a moment, a great opportunity to talk Hero Bell, because there is not a straight or round tube anywhere on this bike, not even close. Pretty awesome. So let's get started here. Step one, how do we get started? All right, so before we get started, I've got my Feedback Sports Pro folding work stand here. You know, this really is probably the best stand in the market at the moment, and really the choice of, I would say, most pros who can make the choice will choose this one. You see a lot of sponsorship obligations out there that have people using other stands, but this one really is pretty brilliant, and quite honestly really only has 2 flaws in my opinion. And those 2 flaws are this clamp here. This clamp here, quite frankly, just clamps in the wrong axis. You know, these are octagonal jaws. They're meant for round tubing or simply shaped tubing, but they close this way, and if you've got anything that's tapered or non-round, and particularly arrow tube shapes, this has you clamping just in the wrong axis, right? So you think arrow tube, like the seat post of this bike, you know, it's pretty strong in this axis, fore aft, along its what we call the chord, or its major length. But it's pretty weak, it's pretty thin-walled in the sides, because that's just not where the strength needs to be. So when the weight comes out of those sides. So this stand can be pretty dangerous for arrow-shaped tubing, which means that a lot of people using them end up clamping on the top tube. But as we'll see in a minute here with this frame in particular, and most modern frames, top tubes are not straight anymore. So even if they're round, they're tapered. And when you close a jaw like this on a taper, you can end up with incredible point loading at the wide end of the tube that can lead to tube failure. So that's a bit of a challenge. And then the other thing that has always bothered me with this stand is that typically if you're clamping a seat post, the work stand ends up quite high. And this inner tube here, it's thin-walled aluminum for weight, but it ends up being pretty flexible. And so you see, you know, especially a heavier bike like my Mercs, when it's in this stand, you get quite a bit of deflection kind of in the back end here. And so when we bring in our Hero Bell, we can actually kind of do two things to fix that. One, the work stand doesn't have to be as high because the Hero Bell is holding the bike at a lower spot, so the bike sits naturally higher, which means less of this thin tube is exposed, which allows the system to be stiffer. Hero Bell also solves the problem of the clamping action of this clamp. And then the last little hack trick that I'd like to show you, and this one has already been done, so I can't do a cool little bit of B-roll where I show you doing it, but if you go to the hardware store and you look for the great stuff, or one of the competitors, you know, the spray foam, the expanding polyurethane foam, tape from the bottom, and actually you can fill this inner tube with that expanding foam, and it will progressively grow up and out the top. But that will create a couple PSI of pressure outward on this tube, but also it will stiffen it up because it changes the way stresses are worked through the tube. I mean, it's as you get further inward, you're less able to stiffen the tube, but by filling it with a stiff foam that actually has a couple PSI of outward pressure, it does surprisingly well to stiffen this up. So, you know, if you have one of these stands, you can pop this plastic top off and basically just spray foam down in it. Be sure to plug it from the bottom first because, you know, from experience, having done this a couple times, it will grow out the bottom and everywhere, and the stuff is impossible to clean. But yeah, that will help with the stiffness, and then we can show how with the way we're holding the bike with the Hero Bell, we can really solve any potential damage or risk to the carbon fiber by using this Hero Bell clamp instead of the clamp in the stand. All right, so we've got our frame out and we are ready to get it mounted up in the work stand. And I just want to show you here kind of what we're talking about with taper. You can see the top tube in profile here is what we would call like a squoval, sort of a square with sort of oval, slightly curved sides instead of flats, and nice rounded corners. But if you look at it top down, it is tapering at probably 1.5 degrees, maybe 2 degrees tip to tail, and that's so you can go from, you know, this nice head tube size down to this nice arrow profile. This taper is going to be under a lot of risk if we are clamping it in this clamp, which is straight. You can imagine, you know, the two parallel lines pinching this tube. You're going to have pretty high stresses at the front of that tube. Similarly, look at the aerodynamic shape of the seat post here. You know, this clamp is going to pinch this way. Now, this shape is incredibly strong on its cord length this way, but like we said, all the weight savings of the carbon construction, all that weight comes out of the sides, right? Because the sides are not as stressed as the front, the tip and the tail. And so this particular style of clamp would be clamping on those sides, on the weakest part of this tube. Same goes if you wanted to clamp on the seat tube here. Same thing, all of your strength is really front and back, and the sides are the thinnest walled part of this construction. The last, I'd say, real advantage of Hero Bell is you think of, you know, this modern frame construction. All your stresses transfer through these joints, and through the use of what we call ply dropping, you can actually step down. Think of the old butted steel tubing, right? You get thin wall in the middle, then it gets thicker, then it gets thicker. Well, with carbon, you can ply, stack, and drop really at will. So you might have, this section of the tube here could be 4, maybe 5 plies thick, and then as you come into these junctions and intersections with the other tubes, you may be up in the 25 to 35 plies thick. Similarly, things like these bottle bosses, you could have a dozen or more plies under the bottle bosses, and then maybe on the underside of the tubing here, you may have ply dropped back to that 4 to 5 ply construction, and that's how a lot of the weight comes out of these modern carbon frames, but it leaves them significantly less strong in the middle of the tube than at the ends of the tube. And that's one of the things I love about the Hero Bell. It's one of the reasons I bought the company, was that the Hero Bell concept really puts the clamping forces out where the frame can best handle them, out at the tube junctions, where not only are you spreading the load between 2 tubes instead of 1, but you are also holding it where the plies are the thickest. So much more spread out, spread across more tubes. Here you have 3 tubes doing the holding the load instead of just 1, and you're holding the tubes where they are the thickest and the strongest against these forces. So we'll go ahead and get our frame into the Hero Bell here. These cones, actually, you can rotate them. I've got them already rotated to handle arrow tubing, square tubing, round tubing. And so I've already got them kind of rotated so you don't have to watch me stand in front of the bike and do that. And then we're going to push this all the way out here and clamp it down. So now you have a little bit of force this way. The bike is being held, again, across these 3 tubes. We're going to clamp it down with our straps. And then here's where we're going to get to some of, I think, what's really fun about building the bike with this method. We are going to build this bike DI2, and I think this creates the ultimate DI2 wire and cabling setup, because now that we are held like this, we can actually go really to any angle. So we'll start here, probably at the head tube, top tube, running down. You can easily run the bike this way to deal at the bottom bracket. And because the loads are spread so far, you don't have to worry about the bike pivoting in this direction. That's a big problem if you're clamping by the seat tube, is that when the bike is upright like this, it wants to pivot this way around the seat tube typically. And if it's around the top tube, when it's upside down, it can want to sway fore and aft this way, which can be quite challenging. So you see here, we've created a system where we just have much better, easier access to the bike as we need to sort of what we would generally call rotisserie it around for cable routing, wiring. It's also nice that everything is nice and high, so if you're working with bottom bracket, you can just put it up in a place that's easier to get to and not have to worry about the bike falling. So here we go. So we are clamped in. We're using our Hero Bell to protect our carbon frame, and we are ready to get started with our build. As we start this process, we want to hear from you what you would like to see in terms of tips, tricks. We plan on getting into greases, lubricants, Loctite, retaining compounds, the tools necessary. We're going to look at things like how to properly cut a steer, but we also want to hear from you. What do you want to know? What do you want to see in terms of sort of the tricks and the how-to from the pro level build of a bike like this? Please give us a like, share us with your friends down here below, and then leave comments asking your questions, telling us your thoughts, and also telling us what you'd like to see in future episodes. We hope to be delivering one of these videos every week for the next 12 weeks as we refine and really dial in the build of our Exploro Race Max. So please give us a shout, let us know what you want, and we will see you soon.